Experimentation is key, right? Be creative. Use this as an opportunity to try weird stuff that maybe, especially in marketing, I know there's kind of tried and true formulas that you can use. Do something weird.
This is The Anonymous Marketer, a podcast where we tackle the biggest questions from the B2B marketing community. But instead of bringing on guests for a quick chat, every question comes from an anonymous source. These are the questions B2B marketers have, but are afraid to ask. Let's start the conversation.
Hello. I am Kirsti Lang, and this is The Anonymous Marketer, where we unpack questions sent in by anonymous marketers. Today, we are talking community and how to evolve a support community into something more. Joining me today is Alex Angel. Hey, Alex.
Hi, Kirsti.
Thank you so much for making time to have this chat about community with me. There's literally nobody else that I would put this question to. Okay, let me read you Alex's bio and you will understand why. So Alex has over a decade of community experience, having kicked off her community career as one of the first hires at Reddit. Since then, she's built communities, products, and teams at Nike and COMSOL and helped many B2B and B2C organizations with their community strategies. She's now a leading community consultant and, as I said, my first port of call for all community-related questions. So yeah, she's got an illustrious skill set and experience under her belt.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here, to chat with you, to answer whatever question you may have for me, and to finally be reunited with my fellow podcast co-host from our old show when we were working at COMSOL together.
Yeah, Alex and I did have a fantastic time at COMSOL together where we worked on the Community Club, which is a community for community professionals. Try to say that 5 times fast. I think I made that joke on our old podcast, actually.
I think so too, but it still hits.
Thank you. I appreciate it. My dad joke repertoire is strong. Yeah, so if you are in the community space, it is definitely a worthwhile community to join. But before we get into all that, Alex mentioned our podcast, which for anyone who hasn't listened to it, is called The Community-Led Show. You can find it on Spotify. Be kind to us. We didn't know what we were doing, really. And we didn't have a professional editing team like the wonderful guys from Motion who are helping with this podcast, hopefully making me look and sound good. But we had a great time. We made a lot of bloopers. I kind of wish we'd had the time to stick together a bloopers reel because that would have been a hit. I think probably better than the rest of the podcast, if I'm going to be honest.
Fully agreed.
We're going to try and do better today. We're going to try and reel it in. Alrighty, let me give you a refresher on where the heck the questions we discuss on the show come from. So the show is called The Anonymous Marketer, as I mentioned, not because me or my guests are anonymous, because that would be very odd, but because we take questions from marketers without revealing their identities. So we really do want to create a safe space where marketers can ask the questions that they maybe don't feel comfortable asking in a public space where their colleagues and their boss may see them. So in order to submit a question for the show, you can go to marketersindemand.com/anonymous, and you'll see a form where you can submit your burning question and then fill out a little bit more details about your company. But it's very vague. You'll be totally anonymous. And yeah, we will include that in the show notes so you can do that easily. Righto, on to our question for the day. I'm going to read it verbatim so that I capture the essence of the asker. So, we have a relatively new community and we are struggling to get users to engage. It's turned into a great space for product support and suggestions, but not much else beyond that. We really want it to become a space for learning and knowledge sharing. How do we make it happen? So this person, just for more context, Alex, is from an enterprise software company with 50 to 200 employees and a relatively small marketing team of 2 to 5. So knowing what I know about you, and all of the wonderful community content that we worked on together, I know you're going to start with why. Am I right?
You know me so well, Kirsti. Yes, I think first and foremost, well, it's great that your company are thinking about community, that you want to do this, that you already have a space where you have people engaging in a certain way. But I think that at this point, you need to take a step back and understand why you want to change the space from this kind of product support and suggestion space to one of learning and knowledge sharing. Does this align with broader company goals? Is this something that you've seen other companies doing and you're like, oh, I really want to do that? Like, what purpose does it serve? And why you care about engagement. Why is that the important metric to focus on right now? Like right now. And how does this also benefit the organization? So that's definitely where I would start.
So what could the possible answers to this question be? What are the benefits of having a community like this so that goes beyond? I mean, there is a whole lot of value to support communities, which we've spoken about a whole bunch in the content we created for Community Club, but specifically focusing on, we would have called this kind of community, so one that focuses on knowledge sharing and relationship building, a community of practice. Am I right in saying?
I think that's pretty close to what this would be.
Okay. And what are the benefits of a community like that for a company?
So depending on the type of company you have, the type of engagement strategies that you use to engage people, which I'm sure we will get into later, the benefits can vary a lot. But primarily what you're looking to see are, easier relationship building that could impact your marketing teams, could impact your customer support and success teams, even your product teams. And I think that's where I see a lot of the benefit coming in is with, actually being able to tap into people who are in theory your ideal customers or your ideal users to get direct information from them. And so you cut a lot of the work out for all of these different teams who may have to, go out into the world and source information from random people, doing surveys with people who aren't invested in your product or what you're building and aren't necessarily going to give you the most reliable and direct feedback or insights. And so building a space like this really helps shortcut, save money, and give you more accurate information for all of the different things that teams may be working on.
Your feedback on this has really intrigued me because, I mean, so what I'm understanding is like it might not be necessary for this person to kind of evolve their community beyond support. And so that's interesting to me because a lot of the benefits that I've seen from communities, I'm part of a lot of communities of practice, and I love being a part of them and engaging with them and learning from people and asking questions there. So I think my default would always be to kind of, well, yes, this is like the next step in community. But actually, if you're a small marketing team like this person, I would imagine that they don't have a community team if there is a marketer asking this question. Yeah. So that's just really interesting to me that you would kind of say, well, let's see if we actually need to do this first.
Yeah, and I think part of this is understanding the motivations for people who are already in the space. So why are they engaging in product support questions, offering suggestions, whatever? Like what problems are they trying to solve in their lives? And clearly this particular thing is being served by the community space that already exists. And as part of your thinking for, why you would transition to a learning or knowledge sharing community structure is if these people have problems that can be solved with that type of space, with that type of focus, with those sorts of engagement programs. If they don't, then maybe if you've already tried doing some experimentation with those types of content pieces or events or workshops or whatever it may be, and they aren't seeing the results that you were hoping for, it could just be that you've made an assumption about the motivations for the people in the community and why they're there that is not being borne out. And then I think, and I know I'm talking about a lot of stuff, so maybe we can unpack this if you want to, but yourself, do you even have the right community members in your community right now? I think that's another thing that companies really forget about is in part of this, especially if they already have a community that someone just spun up or that was better suited for what they had been doing in years past, products past, whatever it may be. But it may be that you do not actually have your ideal community member in the space to be served by what you want to do long term. Because again, maybe you do know that you want to build a knowledge sharing and learning community space because you've done the research, you've heard this from people, but you're still not seeing the engagement that you were hoping for because this particular persona that exists in your community is not going to be served by that type of thing. And so you essentially need to take a good hard look in the mirror and say, do we need to rebuild this whole thing from scratch, or are there ways that we can transition people in and figure out how to meet the needs of people in the community if we still want them there, or if not, how we transition them out.
Okay, we're taking the next step. We're assuming that the basic assumption of that a knowledge sharing community or a community of practice meets a particular business goal. And this is something that this company needs to do in order to meet that. So would that be your first port of call to, if you had been hired as a consultant for this company, would you kind of go and take a look at the members of the community and make that call about whether you need to invite new members or whether you need to start a new community from scratch? Would that be step one?
Yes. I think, every company is different, yada, yada, yada. So your mileage may vary. But oftentimes what I do when I go into companies in a consultant capacity, I try and understand the business landscape first. So what are they building? Who are they building it for? What does it serve? What are the problems the product itself is solving? What are other problems or, related things that ideal customers would be trying to solve in some capacity that a community could help support solve, that the product either can't currently but will eventually, or never will, but that it's a good way to keep people in your product or company ecosystem. So that's where I would start. And then I would move into the question of, are the people that we currently have in the ecosystem the correct people who would be best served or have these problems that we are trying to solve or that we can solve? Because just because they're problems doesn't mean that you should or could or can solve all of that. You have to kind of balance everything just as you would with, product building.
Okay. So you've gone and run this assessment and you have uncovered that there are I'm going full hypothetical, seeing as we don't have all of the information of this person. So maybe there are some people who it seems like they would what would you look for? Let's start there. What would you even look for in the kinds of, would you kind of set up conversations with these members that the company already has? Okay.
Absolutely. I think, pull as much information as you possibly can from prior surveys, from market research, from product development conversations, whatever it may be. But then also dig into the community space that exists and have one-on-one conversations with people. I generally recommend trying to do 20 because you'll get a whole wide variety of commentary from all of these different people. But if you can even just get 5 to 10, that'll point you at least generally in the right direction.
Are you looking at most engaged members to kind of interact with, or just a whole bunch?
I would try and pull from all different types of, engagement personalities, however you want to think about it, within the community space. So there's tooling that exists for you to be able to kind of track people's behaviors, but even the most basic platforms like Slack have really simple tools that will show you, who's been active within the past 30 days or whatever on the free plan. So I would just reach out to them, either a DM or an email, whatever information you have available, that people would feel comfortable with you reaching out to them. That is extremely important. Make sure that you are complying with GDPR, with all of the various data privacy regulations that may apply. Because you also don't want to burn trust with all of these people in this potentially first interaction with them. So meet them where they are, but try and reach out and just understand from people who are active, why are they active? What benefit are they getting? From people who aren't active, why they aren't active, what benefits they are not seeing, and what their expectations were. And then see if any of those align with your expectations, research you've done externally that have led you to kind of going on this journey to begin with, and go from there.
Okay, amazing. Sorry, I've got so many questions running through my head. I'm just trying to what are the things that you need to ask these people? So you hop on a call with community member Kirsti. She's relatively active in the community. What are you going to ask her?
Depending on the vibe, I would probably try and stick to maybe 3 to 5 core questions. And those core questions can change depending on the person, the day, the type of community, whatever. So bear that in mind. But I generally would want to understand their motivations for joining. So is it because they are a current customer or bought a product or whatever it is, and they were looking for other people to talk to about it? They were looking for product support. What was the initial motivator that made them take that extra step within your ecosystem to say, okay, I'm joining this space and I'm going to be active? And then the next thing I would want to understand is why they're active. What do they feel inside that makes them say, okay, my limited free time or my limited mental resources at the end of the day, like I am going to share content, write content, ask questions, what is driving them to do that? Because then you can understand motivations that other people might have for doing that, but also ways that you might be able to tap into that person's, passions, areas of expertise, whatever it is, for your future community space that you're trying to build, to understand, would they be active there and how can we rely on them and how could we potentially, motivate them more or elevate them so that they continue feeling those motivations. And then I would try and understand, what they would be hoping for in a more engaged space with other people. So what types of content are they consuming? Where are they consuming it? What keeps their attention most? Are they a live events person? Are they watching recordings of things? Do they like a workshop with a tangible outcome? That kind of stuff to help you then understand, okay, well, what sorts of engagement strategies might we need to employ if this person is indeed our ideal community member profile? Like, how would we be serving people who are extremely similar to them, the same persona, however you end up framing it? Then on the flip side, for people who are not active but are willing to have a conversation with you, I would ask them why. Why are they not interested in the space? What do they feel is lacking? Would they participate more if X, Y, and Z happened? You can, if you have good conversations with people who are engaged and they give you stuff to bring up, you can specifically list those. But I also generally try, and this is coming from my product background, but to not lead with leading questions, to ask pretty open-ended questions, to let people just ramble at you, because you will get more very interesting nuggets that way than you would if you say, hey, this is how this is, right? And they're like, yeah, you're just not going to get good information that way. So if you go in saying you would like workshops and AMAs and whatever, right? They're going to either say yes or no. But in reality, it may be a combination and then other things that you aren't thinking of. And that's my ramble about that. So
no, that's great. I wanted to add something that I have always done, as I love doing interviews. And in my time as a journalist, my favorite thing to do was to end an interview with, is there anything that I've missed that you think is really important? Is there anything pertinent to the issue that we should be discussing? Or in conversations like this, I would probably, use that and say, is there anything else you'd like to tell me? Just something along those lines. And I often find that random question, random, vague, nebulous question at the end of a conversation will give you gold. And I think it also kind of just, asking questions in that way shows that you really do value this person's opinion. And you're not, as you say, just kind of looking to check boxes, yes or no, and, kind of churn out a graph at the end of it. You genuinely care specifically what they want. Yeah. So once you've had these conversations, you will likely, hopefully, have a very good idea, especially if you've done all 20. You will have a fairly decent idea of the kinds of things you need to be moving forward with in your community, whether that's AMAs or content or, whatever the case may be. In your experience, Alex, after having gone through kind of this process, what are the most common engagement plays that you have kickstarted after your research phase?
Sure. So one final thing that I do want to add about the research phase is that I think making sure you have qualitative and quantitative data to support your steps forward is important. And don't just rely on the people in your community space that exists, because again, if the end result is that you need to start from scratch, then a lot of the information, not all of it, but a lot will not necessarily be relevant. And so if there's a way for you to tap into the broader network, whether it's, customers who are in the pipeline or people who, once you've done a persona building exercise, you can recognize on LinkedIn or other platforms would be an ideal customer, community member, whatever, do direct outreach to them and ask them to either do a call or send them a survey, just so you get a broader perspective. And I think this is a really important step that is definitely harder to do because it's not low-hanging fruit where you're just like, oh, I'm going to shoot off some messages in Slack, just DM some people. But the amount of effort is worth it in order to actually make sure you're covering all of your bases.
Okay, amazing. Thank you for adding that in. That's super, super valuable. Just on that note,
Sure.
how do you incentivize people to talk to you? Is it just a case of kind of asking really nice things?
Sometimes that works. I think if you go in really nicely, and especially if you have some kind of just small tailored message specifically for that person as to why you have reached out to them, you will be more likely to get a response. If you're just sending out some generic form that's like, hey, I came across your thing on LinkedIn, please respond, people are just not going to do it, or you're going to have a very, very low hit rate. But if you say, hey, I saw that you commented on this article from this person and I feel blah, 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 or hey, I saw you on, this YouTube video you posted, or I heard you on a podcast, or saw you were connected to so-and-so and I know them through blah. Like, you are more likely to get people who are just willing out of the goodness of their heart to lend time, because people like to be recognized. If you are having a lot of trouble getting people to respond, you can offer an incentive, whether it's a $5 Amazon gift card or entering into a raffle for something bigger. Even just a small gesture really helps. But I've found that if you approach people nicely and with something that shows that you've taken the time to understand who they are as a human, that they are more likely to respond.
Okay, that is really, really good to know. Thank you. So now you have collected responses from members in your community, both active and inactive, and you've reached out to some people outside the community. What are the engagement plays that you found yourself kicking off as a result of this information gathering kind of most often in your experience?
It depends. As everything, I'm going to hedge this with it depends. What I do always recommend, and what I have always done myself, is to essentially start with a minimum viable community, which you can read about. It's like a minimum viable product, but it's, a series of little things, experiments that you can do to try and gauge whether or not people are actually interested in that after you have figured out who these people are. So some of them you need to do upfront before you really start inviting people. Some of them you do once people have started to come, because you can't just invite people to an empty space and say, have at it. It's definitely not an if you build it, they will come situation.
I hate it when people say that.
There has to be value already created for them to consume, to participate in, for people to actually spend any of their time there. And so to answer your question directly, what I typically recommend people do first is content creation. And this can be reusing content that you've already created for other marketing channels, but giving it a fresh coat of paint potentially. It could be during your outreach to find who these ideal community members are, that you say, hey, I would love to co-create a blog post with you about this topic that I know you're an expert in, whatever, because you're, one, laying a foundation with that person to hopefully one day be part of your community, but two, actually having something that's novel that people that you are looking to invite to the community that match that person's profile would be interested in reading. And you can even start experimenting with some small events that are definitely not going to break the budget. Some things are worth spending a lot of money on if you know that it is going to be very well received outside of your network and be a huge draw. That would kind of be a catalyst. But even if you just start peppering in some small things, whether it's, an AMA, that you can either record and have a video of, and then you turn it into a blog post to accompany it. You give them something that they can share. You share it in a community space. Like recycling all of this in a bunch of different ways is really important to build that content library, but also to make sure that what you are doing is directly relevant to your target personas. I cannot stress that enough. You can't just dump a bunch of stuff in. It has to be directly relevant. And another good way of doing this is newsletters. And so you can build an audience before you build a community. And then it's just a question of taking the steps to turn that audience into active, engaged community members. And so that's when the other small engagement plays for a minimum viable community come into effect, is like, once you've got people's attention, how do you make them take extra steps and put in work that you can build off of?
So I want to come back to the newsletter question, because I love a newsletter. What is that step? If you have, for example, if you have an engaged newsletter audience, or you have a decent newsletter audience, and you would like to have these people in your community, how do you, I mean, it's not like, it's a little bit more than a CTA, right? Like, you can't just be like, hey, join our community.
Definitely. You can, I think you can to a certain degree. You can certainly try and see what happens, see what that click-through rate is. But I would try and do small habit forming activities before having that specific call to action, or before you move that call to action further up the page. And you want to get people in the habit of responding, is basically what you're looking for. And so have prompts where you're looking for people to actually send you a response or to share their information, whatever it may be. So a poll, a question, something that lets people know that you are interested in what they have to say, and then following up. So you then have to follow up. And so that could be sharing the poll results and calling out some specific highlights or individuals, depending on the types of questions you might ask. It would be, sharing a direct response from someone to the prompt in the next newsletter, reaching out to that person and saying, hey, let's co-create some other content piece, after they've taken that first initial step to build on those relationships. And then I think you could reasonably invite people to a small event, perhaps, as that first baby step, and saying, hey, we're going to have a hangout. It's for newsletter subscribers. Come, show up. Here's what we're going to be talking about, so that people have at least some nugget to prepare, because a lot of people need that push before they're actually going to contribute or show up and have a conversation. And then from there, once you have a first face-to-face, it becomes much easier to bring people into a community space, because then in newsletters after that, you can say, hey, we've got a group of people who we all met on this call, we're like chatting, blah, 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 or however you want to frame it. So there's a bunch of different ways, but I have seen that work before in a number of different instances. But actually, Kirsti, I'm curious, have you had any experience with that?
With newsletters? Or?
With newsletters, with getting people to engage off of newsletters?
Yeah, it is really interesting. I think you do almost develop a kind of a cohort of like really engaged subscribers who you will start to really know by name, because you'll see them sharing your content on LinkedIn, or, if you have a community, they'll be leaving comments in there. An activity that we kicked off when I was still at the community club is that we wanted to kind of check that our content was still hitting the mark. So we did actually embark on it, and it was newsletter specific, so it wasn't for our community. So we had, I think it was about 2,000 people in the community club, and then is that number right? I may be misremembering. It's higher. Alex is
3,500.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, shows you how much I remember. Not good with numbers. But then we had about 6,000 newsletter subscribers. Obviously, it was a much bigger audience. And what we wanted to do is kind of check that our content was still hitting the mark. So we did actually embark on a qualitative research, project, where we had some interviews, which were really, really interesting. We had a survey that we ran in the newsletter, which got very good response rates. I think We did, as an incentive, we offered kind of people like a chance to win like a hoodie, and people love a hoodie. So yeah, and I mean, that was really, really interesting. It kind of helped shape the direction of our content. It helped affirm that we had some really positive responses. And a part of me kind of wonders if like people were just trying to get these. I don't know. My imposter syndrome is like, do they mean this, or do they just want a nice jumper? Um, but yeah, I mean, so that was a really valuable exercise for me, and having that face-to-face time with people who read the newsletter was amazing. And I think that's to your point about kind of getting on a call or meeting someone, that just immediately opens up the relationship. It's just, you're no longer just like an avatar or a face name on a screen. You're an actual human being. Like, and it goes both ways, right? You're not like just a faceless marketer or someone running. You're just a person like them. And yeah, that's been really valuable for me as well.
Absolutely. And I think your point about starting to recognize subscribers is so true, where you'll notice, okay, this person is opening every single newsletter that we're sending. This person has responded to prompts multiple times. And so you don't even have to necessarily do a group approach to getting people to engage off
Yeah.
of that, right? You can just reach out and say, hey, we're thinking about building a community, or hey, we're planning on changing how the community is set up and would really love for you to join if you're interested. Help us build it. We want your opinions, we want your feedback. You can help be one of those founding members, whatever you want to call
Yeah.
them. And that really makes a difference and is a great way to have those early people who are, that they have been very active in your audience, and transition them as individuals into engaged community members.
Yeah, I think that like one-on-one outreach, that like just, you know, as you said, if you're doing like outreach to kind of people that you would like to have in your community, just making it personal and human and authentic, I think that goes such a long way in building that strong relationship and turning them into an engaged member. Um, yeah, that's okay. I've gone off topic here, but let's bring it back. Let's bring it back to how do we get engagement within the community? I think we've talked a lot about bringing people in, which is also really important, because if you do have a product or support community, it's likely that if you're not going to start from scratch, you probably do need to bring people in who want to be having these conversations. And maybe that means having a conversation about, do you only want customers in the community? Do you also want prospects, or people that could be using your product, or, just people that work in the industry that you're selling to? And that can be really valuable. That's the approach that we took with Community Club. And the product and the community was very, very separate. We had like a separation of church and state.
Exactly. Yeah. Understanding personas is super critical. And I think that goes back to the, what purpose does this serve for the organization? So is it acquisition? Is it retention? Is it revenue specifically? Are you looking for actual money coming directly from members, either through a paid community, through, ticket sales, whatever? But what is the purpose, and who are those people that tie directly back to that purpose?
Absolutely. And how do you know? My final question for you today, Alex, unless you have anything else to add, because I will leave that question at the end. I've literally just like given away my secret sauce. So last question is, when you kind of kick off your new engagement plan, what results are you looking for? I know we talk a lot about kind of vanity metrics and metrics that actually move the needle on business goals. How do you know you have been successful with a specific engagement play or experiment?
Yeah, it may take some time. And I know that is what people do not want to hear, but you may be looking at anywhere from 3 to 6 months before you can reasonably say whether what you were doing is actually working.
Okay.
And it's difficult in this modern reality that we live in of agile and constant improvement and all of that good stuff, which I do believe in. But I think because this is so human focused, human centered, people are really difficult to, predict patterns of behavior. And there are a lot of external factors that you have zero control or influence over that will impact behavior in the community space. It's not like using a product where you can direct people's behaviors one way or another. You can change how they're interacting, whatever. This is people actually choosing to participate because there is some perceived added benefit for them. And they may have a death in the family. They may be super busy at work, whatever. You can't judge based on that alone. So bear this in mind, where if it is early days and you had like 10 people come to one of your events, and then the next one there's 5, and the next one there's 30, and then the next one no one shows up, you probably should keep doing it, because you still don't have enough data to actually say, hey, this is working or this isn't. So timeline, keep that in mind. If you are consistently seeing zero engagement, zero engagement, zero engagement on something that like a newsletter should have engagement, then you definitely can say faster than 3 to 6 months, okay, this is not working, we need to change this. I generally look for things like retention. And so how often are people coming back? Are they logging in once a week? Are they logging in multiple times a week? Are they doing that over the course of multiple months? Do they have weird gaps? Look for patterns and behaviors. See if you can extrapolate that to other members within the community, or is this just individual behaviors? I would also just like set some baseline metrics, especially if you do have this be focused primarily on customers. So does it change customer behavior over the course of 6 to 8 weeks? Are they more engaged in the product? Are they less engaged in the product? No change. Whatever the behaviors are that you're looking for people who are in this community to do with your business, like that's how you should be checking things. Do not care about growth numbers. They have some importance, but realistically, what you're looking for is how often are people showing up? Are they coming back? Are they attending events? Are they consuming content? And then look for upward trends. So it may still be really small to begin with, because your community maybe is going to have 20 people in it. Who knows? Maybe it's going to be 20, maybe it's going to be 2,000. But just look for upward trends over the course of the month, the weeks, however often you are able to get that kind of data. And that is how I typically look early on at what success is. If you're seeing kind of zero change, or if you're seeing a decline in previously good behaviors in other areas of the business of the community, those are definitely red flags to me of like, okay, change this up, look for something different. But I also would say, try and ask people why, because maybe there's a specific reason. Maybe there's actually something that's broken with the product and that's what changes their behavior, but product team doesn't know. Who knows? There's a lot of stuff that you can look into. And I think it's really important to just understand that you should be looking for trends, not be necessarily trying to hit numbers early on. Later, once you actually have established patterns of behavior, when you can do comparative analytics, that is when you should try and get into the nuance of like performance metrics. But early on, just be looking to see like, does this resonate with people? Does it not resonate with people? Does it actually tie back to what the business is trying to do? Are there ways that we can be observing and collecting data that would benefit other teams that are not just the community/marketing team?
Yeah. And I think as marketers, I know I'm very guilty of this, having like run social channels, for example. We're very quick to draw conclusions about whether something is working or something is not. So this post has gotten 0 engagement. It was a complete flop. We're never doing it again. And that is so different with community. And I've seen this in my own work in the communities that I've been involved in, is, it often feels, if you're kicking off a new ritual or a new engagement play or an event, you're going to be, I think, Alex, this is a phrase you used once and it's stuck in my head ever since then. You're going to be shouting into the void. And it feels like that a lot of time. It is very, very humbling. But to your point, it is so important to stick at it, because in doing that, in engaging in that way in the community yourself, you're also modeling the behavior for other members. And I think you're making it okay for them to engage in the way that you want them to engage. And sometimes they need to see you doing it for a couple of weeks or months for them to feel comfortable enough to do it. So yeah, I think don't kind of put on your traditional marketing hat and, look for those numbers right out of the gate, because they are going to come a lot more slowly in community.
Consistency is huge for communities. Yeah. So having some kind of schedule is really important because people will come to rely on it. And so even if, let's say, for sake of argument, you have a Slack and you are just rambling on to yourself in Slack and no one is engaging and whatever, extremely demoralizing. That's fine. If you continue to do that every day, every week, whatever the cadence is, so if people know Monday is when the newsletter's dropping, Wednesday is when there's a prompt, whatever, people will start showing up for those things. It may take a while. It may take some time. You may have to do some direct outreach to people that you know would be interested in responding. There's no shame in this. This is the big secret. Every community professional does this. Even with super engaged communities, they'll like DM someone and say, hey, this question's gone unanswered. Would you mind dropping some knowledge in the thread? It's totally fine to do that. But it's the consistency that's really key. And you'll start to notice, like, if you don't have a newsletter 1 week or 2 weeks in a row, people will reach out and say, hey, what happened? Even if you've never heard from them before. It's wild. So keep that in mind as well, where it may feel disheartening and pointless, but you really don't know whose life you're impacting with the work that you are doing until you stop doing it. And they're like, what the hell, guys?
Yeah, that's how you know it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there is nothing, and I think this is why community is something that, when I joined COMSOL in the community club, I had no idea what I was doing until, Alex told me, and I saw it in action. I've seen how beneficial it can be. It is a long game, but it's a good one. It's really fun and it's really rewarding. Business goals, metrics, that's all great and you can get there, but it's just also like a lot of fun, valuable. Yeah, on that happy note, Alex, was there anything that we missed that you would like to add to this conversation?
Oh boy, put me on the spot, why don't you?
This question was coming.
I had an inkling. I think I just want to leave you all with the reminder that experimentation is key, right? And you should be creative. Use this as an opportunity to try weird stuff that maybe, especially in marketing, I know there's kind of tried and true formulas that you can use. Do something weird. Do something where you're like, oh man, I've always wanted to try, I don't know, having people show up with their cat in a tutu. Like, I don't know. Something ridiculous.
You want that, don't you?
Not that I've done that before. I definitely want people to do that and invite me. But you just don't know what reaction you're going to get from people. And it may be something that, sparks excitement and you may never do it again, but people will talk about it and it'll be a draw. So get creative, give it time, don't give up. And there's a bunch of resources that you can use if you are struggling with that sort of creativity, because we've all been there and it's really hard if you've never done this before, and especially if this is just falling on your lap as a marketing person, since I know a lot of companies will say, oh, social, writing, you can do this too. Yeah. So don't hesitate to do the research, reach out to people. Community people are the best people, and seriously, if you just DM them on LinkedIn, you will get a response. I guarantee it. So just make the effort and you'll be rewarded.
That's community in a nutshell. I think you've just summed it up. Okay. Well, we're up at time. Alex, thank you so much for making the time for me today and for our anonymous asker. I hope they appreciate all of your wisdom. You've certainly given me a lot to think about. I'm going to go and kick off some things in my own work, probably today, because I'm very excited. If you would like to submit your question, we will put the submission link in the show notes. I am going to double check it again. Here it is. It is marketersindemand.com/anonymous. Again, if you don't know how to spell anonymous, I don't blame you. It's a weird word. Link is in the show notes. Yeah, Alex, thank you so much. I'm sure this is not the last time that I will invite you on the show. It has been a delight. And have a great day.
Thanks so much for having me, Kirsti.
Thanks for checking out this episode of The Anonymous Marketer. This show is part of Marketers in Demand, a network of podcasts featuring the world's leading B2B marketers. Unlock your full potential as a B2B marketer by going to marketersindemand.com.